Good evening and welcome to the NDTV Dialogues, a conversation of ideas. Tonight we look at an idea, a topic which has become increasingly controversial. The Indian Muslim, his role today when we look at India First and Sabka Saath Sabka Vikas, secularism and the Indian Muslim. Joining me on this debate this evening, I'm joined by Salman Khurshid, a former minister in the UPA government. He was also Minister for Minority Affairs. I'm also joined by Shazia Ilmi of the BJP. Also with me, Asaduddin Owaisi, MP of the AIMIM. Also with me, retired Lieutenant General Syed Hasnain. And with me, Anusha Rizvi, filmmaker and scriptwriter. Najma Heptullah, Union Minority Affairs Minister, was also to join us, but she fell ill before the program. Thank you all very much for coming in. Salman Khurshid, you've just written a book on At Home in India, the Indian Muslim and his saga. Why do you think that book is relevant at this time? Do you think it's especially relevant at this time?
Well, yes and no. I mean, this is an ongoing issue. Interestingly, many of the things that I've written in the book are 30 years old, and nothing has changed in 30 years. And people think that when you talk about a subject of Muslims, you have to talk about who's blame and who's responsible, etc. It's going above that to say that the issues have not changed. And of course, with the BJP victory, some of those issues that are treated as their thematic issues have come to the fore. Somewhere more vigorously, somewhere less vigorously. So I think it's important that that these issues get examined, and that at least they're out in the public debate, so that people get aware and understand what the issues are.
It's interesting you say that it hasn't changed because, of course, it was a Congress government which was in power for much of those 30 years. You were Minority Affairs Minister. Has it been a failure of the Indian political class, of the so-called secular parties, that it hasn't changed?
Well, there are 100 reasons, but it hasn't changed in the sense that we are still talking about reservations, we are still talking about riots and compensation, we're still talking about the backwardness, we are still talking about inclusion. I was not in that government, UPA won, but I think it made a remarkable break from the past by saying, let's just put everything on the table and figure out what is right and what is not, and what is the truth. And that's the Sacha Committee and Rangnath Mishra Commission. And I think that they've done a human service to this country by saying, let's not just talk about political haggling. The truth is that this is where the Muslims of India stand. And they suggested how it could be addressed through reservations, through the Equal Opportunity Commission. I was very, very impressed with the Equal Opportunity Commission idea, but unfortunately we couldn't push it through because there are a host of reasons that held it back.
Shazia Ilmi, come in here, because in the recent elections, of course, one of the themes that ran through, as the Prime Minister said, was India First, Sabka Saath Sabka Vikas, that we should not have pandering to minorities. Do you feel, as an Indian Muslim, that in recent governments, it had become too much about identity politics, looking at a Muslim victimhood, rather than looking at an India which progresses together?
Absolutely, and I think there is need for Muslims also to look at themselves anew, also to seek a new deal, so to speak, to work on a new narrative, not to be victims of some kind of political slavery, so to speak, but negotiate a better deal for themselves, politically as well, with different parties. I think there is need for all kinds of Muslims, and not just a certain kind, to be part of the political milieu, so to speak.
Do you like the word minority and minority politics?
I find it very objectionable, because you compete as an Indian citizen. You participate as an Indian citizen. You're an equal stakeholder. So to be constantly being reduced to a member of a minority community, rather than to be seen as an equal participant or a seeker of rights or a citizen, is indeed unfair. But unfortunately, democracy has done this to Muslims who see themselves as vote banks and suffer from a persecution complex, so to speak, which is often whipped up by leaders within the community and without, and used as a game.
I hope you're not referring to Mr. Owaisi.
Well, there's so many political parties, and I think each party is equally guilty of that, of one kind of politics or the other. So I would agree with, concur with Mr. Khurshid when he says that It should not be about political haggling. But to some extent, it's important to be able to negotiate and increase the negotiating power of an average Muslim. And not to be scuttled in a corner, expecting a messiah to save them from time to time.
Well, the word negotiating power is also interesting because then it comes down, in a sense, to what I think we were talking about as well, that do we look at Muslims as a vote bank? But Mr. Owaisi, why don't you come in to look at the points raised by both Mr. Khurshid and Ms. Ilmi, really? Are politicians today cynically, when you cater to a community or when you project yourself as a Muslim politician, do we undercut the Indianness of yourself and your party? Why do we need a party catering solely to one community?
No, if what you say is right, then why don't we have objections to Akali Dal, to AIDMK? Why don't we have objections to BJP party being run by a particular caste in Karnataka? Why don't we have objections to Congress party being run by a particular caste in Andhra Pradesh? Why don't we have objections to NCP espousing the cause of Marathas? So these are very well disguised way of saying that, oh, to make me responsible, that saying, oh, you practice particular politics. We have to understand that the Constitution talks about minorities in Article 29 and 30. So there is no question of saying that one should not use the word minority. The Constitution talks about it. And if you blame me for the politics which I am practicing, then I have genuine questions which I want the bigger political parties to answer. That is, why is it that after 67 years, we have only 2% Muslim representation in government employment? Why is it that the latest NSSO 20th round shows that there's unemployment levels are higher than Dalits of Muslims, my work participation rate, my consumption, name it, I am the lowest. So people who have been in power, they have really not addressed the real issues, whether it is educational, social or political empowerment. And I am of the firm opinion that unless and until political empowerment in real terms happen, the development of Muslims will not happen. And what this is to be seen, whether it's Maharashtra, the Marathas have gained because of political empowerment. The BSP was in power to a certain extent, yes, the Dalits gained in terms of, at least in security. So, and what is wrong if Muslims participate more in our democracy? I am not diluting my Indianness. I am an Indian Muslim. And I have more right over this nation because, as Salman Sahab wrote in his book, that on 15th August 1947, we chose India. So we are Muslims not only by birth but by choice, and that's why we are Indian Muslims. So there's nothing wrong in being called a minority and to espousing the cause of minorities.
I'm going to come back to you on that issue because espousing the cause, what are the lines which blur when it comes to hate speech and various sections that are being imposed? I'll come back to you on that. But let me get in Lieutenant General Syed Hasnain, because one good thing is we don't know Muslim representation in the Indian Army because it's never considered as a point. In fact, in the Justice Sachet Committee, there was an absolute outrage when it even came up to the fact that the religious census would be done in the Indian Army. When someone says that, are you an Indian Muslim, or refers to you as a Muslim, former Muslim GOC, when you were with this, does that hurt you? How do you stand? But when you look at larger issues of the community, do you think perhaps there is some merit in what's been said, that you do need to look specifically at community problems, look at reservation and other issues?
Thank you, and that's an outstanding question. And before I proceed to respond to that, let me say I agree with almost everything which has been said before. What Shazia was speaking was the most desirable. What Salman Sahab was speaking was absolutely desirable. What Owaisi Sahab has spoken is actually reality. It is having a realist approach to politics in India, minority politics in India. But now coming back specifically to the armed forces, I'm a second generation soldier. And in fact, I'm a second generation general. My father was also a general of the Indian Army. So we came as a family by choice. And ours is a very strange family. We are a family which is divided by the international border. We have much of our family in Pakistan. And you'll be even more surprised when you hear that actually our family has produced a general, a corps commander on Pakistan side of Kashmir. And India has produced someone from this family as a corps commander this side in Kashmir, which is one of the strangest aspects. Right? But having said that, let me also state that when it comes to the army, this is one institution which has really never brought faith anywhere near it. Our system of, for example, praying. if nothing else, following our individual faiths. We have a system called the Mandir Masjid Gurdwara, MMG system, where under one roof you put all 3 flags are put up there, all the required, sacred books are put there, and everyone prays. You would be surprised that at times when on Eid, I have had a Sikh Granthi actually leading the Eid prayers. So the army is the wrong place to actually look at for this kind of a thing. But specifically
Perhaps
to come to
it's
that
the right
question.
place to look at it.
Exactly. Also, I would say the right place to look at it in sending a symbolic message to the rest of the nation. But I think you should realize that the army is something a little different. We have a culture, a military culture is never looks at faith in any way. The fact that I was being called a Muslim corps commander in Kashmir after 20 years, having returned back to take command 15 corps, well, I should say it should have been hurting, but it didn't really hurt me. Because I was looking at it from a realist point of view. Because here, actually, people were getting excited that here's a Muslim who's come to command the corps out here. For me, I was only bringing my Indianness, and I was only bringing my professionalism to the corps and leading that corps completely as far as anti-terrorist operations in Kashmir were concerned. So, the army is a very fine example. I wish that the army's example could be used to actually project, send home messages to the youth of India, to various people. Politicians, people who are mature, generally understand all these aspects of the army. But it's generally the youth in India who are not aware of all this. Media channels do not project enough about the armies, this particular aspect of secular army. They don't talk too much. The social media doesn't have too much a reference to these kind of things.
Yes.
So I wish that this kind of an example can be projected much more strongly outside.
Anusha, come in. As a young Indian and as somebody who's in the world of films where, like the army in a very different way, faith hasn't really mattered because, of course, the top stars currently are all Muslims. But yet we see them drummed up when you see a fundamentalist Hindu organization and we'll talk about love jihad or we'll talk about don't watch their movies suddenly coming up. What do you think when you listen to the politicians around the panel tonight, or even when you are being addressed in rallies or the rhetoric is being talked about the Indian Muslim?
Sonia, actually, I have to just say one thing. Being a film person, I absolutely love this image of the Muslims who are sitting here and discussing, because we happen to be the poshest, elitist of them all, who are sitting here and actually pretending to discuss the Muslim problem, which is primarily 70 to 80% poor. So I have a completely different, I mean, not practical, not whatever. My understanding of this is that we do have a historical process which happened 70 years ago, which was the partition. There will be consequences to it. There are consequences to it that we are facing. However, I feel that the secular unraveling of the secular debate so far, including the media, all of us have been trying to put it at the doorstep of the Maulana, of the Maulvi, of the religious man. Exactly why? Because he's a religious man. He is by definition not secular, right? So when we say that we are a secular country, a secular nation, the onus of that is not on the religious man. It is on the political class. And in my opinion, we have, and I'm not excluding anyone at all, I feel the Indian Muslim has not been given a leadership. The leadership has only been interested in certain, for instance, issues like ek masjid, ek fatwa, one Maulana, one something. But if I was to search around and see, okay, when was the last time a prominent Muslim spoke up about Narega, food security, pension? Because it's not as if Narega is going to cut for only the Hindus. The budget's going to cut, it's going to affect everyone, right? So if there are 14% Muslim, is that the correct figure now?
That's what they say it would be.
So let's say 14% Muslims, out of which 70 to 80 are poor, right? Out of 70% are engaged in agriculture, right? So how come I have not heard Mr. Salman Khurshid ever speak up about the farming poor and their rights as Muslims? I mean, what about Mr. Owaisi? In your constituency, sir, are there only Muslims? Are there no Hindus? What will you do with a policy like Narega? What happens to those Muslims? Last year, this government cut out, Shazia, cut out 20% of the health budget.
Can I just reply on that?
Yeah,
Can I just finish?
She'll finish and then we can all get reaction. Yeah.
So 20% of the health budget gets cut last year. The 20% budget cut is not only going to affect the Hindus, it's going to affect everyone. Now, I didn't hear any prominent Muslim leader speaking about this. Why? Because the Muslims are this vague idea who only live in four walls of a mosque and only are out there to be, given fatwas to.
But why would you need a Muslim leader to address those issues? Wouldn't a political leader who is talking about it address
what is the Muslim,
all communities who would be affected by it?
What is the Muslim leader addressing?
Anything and everything, Narega and probity and governance and all of that, not just the minority issues. That's exactly the stereotype that you're perpetuating that we want to fight. When I was part of Anna Hazare movement, and with all due respect, I'm not a prominent Muslim leader, but
Shazia, you are.
Well, if I am, then you must include me in this, because we spoke about corruption and we spoke about probity, and many Muslims attacked me and said we should talk about only communalism. So I think as a Muslim leader who happens to be a Muslim, I have as much a right to talk about my Jat brothers and my Dalit sisters, as well as anyone else, and pick up a topic of my choice, which is sanitation or whatever, then only to be hassled and burdened with and saddled with the minority issues, but which must be addressed by all and everybody in this country. Because after all, we're not just at home in India, India is a homeland.
I'm going to just get first Mr. Khurshid and Mr. Owaisi to answer that. But Mr. Khurshid, I think the point, when the UPA government looked at Muslims, did they really look at issues of uplifting the community, at how Narega will impact them, etc.? Did you look at them as how will we get them to vote for us? How did you go beyond treating Muslims as vote banks? Because you, of course, in that controversy, but announcing quotas for Muslims, and that was accused of being done as an election gimmick just before the UP elections.
Now let's just get two or three things right. One is we are in a democracy. And in a democracy, a political leader's job is not to drive away votes. I think this is a stupid idea of anyone saying you're trying to get votes. How do you get votes? By saying things that your people want to hear. Now, there are limits to what you can say to your people. And that, of course, comes out from a debate like this. What are the limits to which you will go? There are people who would go and say, I support extremism. And you say, no, this is not good for our society. And there are people who say, I support affirmative action. And then somebody else might say, no, this is not good for our society. But affirmative action is being accepted anywhere in the democratic world. Now, if for affirmative action, somebody other than the four who are here would talk, would be wonderful. Wonderful. I wish you had got one filmmaker who was not a Muslim, and one lawyer who was not a Muslim, or a politician who was not a Muslim, and one social activist who was not a Muslim, and talked about the Muslim problem. Why don't they come and say something about the Muslims? Now, there are things that people don't know that we know, right? But we are not claiming to be sole spokespersons. I'm here not because I applied to you to be here, because you couldn't find somebody better. And that's true about each person here, right? That is why, even in government, you wanted to bring Najma Heptullah, right? You didn't want to bring Mr. Gadkari, right?
Well, she's the Minority Affairs Minister.
Why Minority Affairs Minister? We've just heard that it shouldn't just be about minorities. It should be about everything. That's one point. The second point is, when we speak on something else, you don't listen. I speak on 2,000 things every day. Nobody listens because it's not important. The moment I speak on Muslims, they all listen. The friends listen, the enemies listen, etc. Somebody wants inclusion and representation in the election commission. The biodatas come out. There is always a Muslim in the election commission. The biodatas come out. And this is also a reality. But once you get that job, you suddenly become a secular Indian. You're no longer a Muslim. Then anything a Muslim says is unacceptable. I didn't say something about reservation that Satchar, Rangnath Mishra and the cabinet hadn't said. And if Jairam Ramesh had said 4% for Muslims, it would not have mattered.
That's
right? But Salman Khurshid said 4% for Muslims. Somebody had to stand up and say, fix this guy. He said 4%. But I was then forgotten that I was a law minister. All that was remembered was that I was a Muslim minister.
No, but I want to get to Mr. Owaisi really in that, because I think it's interesting, because your emotion, I think, when you just gave this answer, Mr. Khurshid, I think points to the fact that you do feel that you've perhaps been put into a box, or looked at in a different aspect at
trying
that
to
time.
put us into a box, and I have no intention of remaining in that box.
And I just want to
I'll jump
clarify
right
that
out of the box.
everybody who I got here was from is Muslim, because I thought in discussing it to look at different representatives, which is why not all of you are actually politicians here. I just want to bring in Mr. Owaisi on that, because you have said many times that I'm not a coolie of secularism, and the word secularism itself has become almost a political bombshell in the moment or in the current time. But also to ask Mr. Owaisi, that does that, by saying that you're a torchbearer of secularism, or that you believe in a different kind of secularism, are you ignoring the fact that some of what you propagate is seen as incitement? The fact that many state governments actually don't want to in cities, because they say that it's an incitement to violence, that crowds will gather, that you're a threat to law and order. Do you feel that perhaps that you're going, rather than looking at development of a community, you're looking at a very cynical, selfish way of using them? That in that sense, you're like other politicians you accuse of having used the Muslim community.
Now, why I am not being allowed to address a public meeting is, let me clarify to you that I don't have a single case. I might be having 4 or 5 criminal cases. I don't have a single case of inciting or provocative speeches. And those cases which the honorable lady is laughing,
I'm sorry,
is because no. I know she has a hatred for Muslim politicians. Fine, that's all right.
It may be all
not at all.
No, fine.
Not at all.
Those cases where criticizing the Babri Masjid judgment, I went and stopped the demolition of a masjid, and against the Danish cartoon. So these are the cases which are available on the net. Talking about Manrega, yes, my speech is there. Salman Sahab was there in the house. We asked more under 15-point program, Manrega should be included. And the last point is the word secular. The reason I detest using that word is because when I say no, we should have more political representation. So the Congress, BJP, regional secular parties say no, you vote for us, we are your secular masters. I am saying that no, I want to be a master of my own destiny. Yeah. I have voted for you from last 60 years. I don't want to vote for you. I want to vote for myself. I want to become master of my destiny. I want to take my own decisions. And that is why you see from 1957 onwards till 2014, what is the Muslim representation in the Lok Sabha? And you take out record, how many times have Muslim issues or minority issues have been spoken in the Indian Parliament? All these facts are there, figures are there, and that is why I say that whenever I happen to contest election in Maharashtra, immediately I was said, oh, you are going to divide secular votes. My question was, I didn't contest the Lok Sabha elections. Only Hyderabad election had contested. But still BJP could win 288 seats. So who's responsible? That is why I say this whole the burden of putting secularism on my head. No, you must always vote for us.
No, but surely the burden of being a progressive politician, forget Muslim, being a progressive politician is on your head. Your brother made the vilest speeches, which is available on YouTube. He, of course, went to jail for that. He is a member of the AIMIM, which you're the head of.
Yes.
Even your speeches are very much on the borderline. I've heard them on YouTube. Your speeches are, in a sense, whipping up a sentiment which is seen as anti-community.
I cannot give a speech to your liking. I will never give a speech which will across the board people like. I will definitely say things and prove me wrong. And I'm telling you that not a single case has been booked against me on provocative speech. We contested the Maharashtra election. I addressed 30 public meetings. Not a single case was booked.
But do you defend your brother's speech?
It is for the courts to decide. No media.
But you don't condemn what he said.
No media discourse is over without bringing Akbar's name. I'm thankful to you that formality is over now. But let the courts decide.
Why don't you condemn what he said?
Why should I condemn when the matter is in court? Why should I condemn it? Let the courts decide.